what a disappointment right now at this time. I can't get into the book. Hi everybody, it's Shuba. Welcome back to my channel. I read a lot of books in the month of April. Most of them were excellent. I loved most of them, but I did have a few books that I finished and didn't like or DNF'd. And I say that loosely for one of them, and I will tell you why. But let's get into the books that I read for the month of April, and I will be talking about them not in the order of what I read and when I read them, but I'm going to be talking about them in the order of my favorites to least favorite. My favorite books that I read this month, it is the Part of Your World series by Ali Jimenez. This is the third book that I do own. I don't own the first one or the second one. I read them on my Kindle, but the first one is Part of Your World, and then the second one is Yours Truly. I have them up right here. They are technically interconnected standalones, but also part of a series if you look online, because it does say like book number 1, number 2, and then number 3. I absolutely love this series so much. A lot of people talk about not reading them in order, and I think that there's something so special about reading them in order just because of the characters within each of the stories. Don't do that. I think you should read them 1, 2, 3. The first book, Part of Your World, is about Alexis. She is a doctor at a hospital in Minnesota. I forgot the city. And then our main male character, his name is Daniel, and he lives in a very small village, and he is technically the mayor of this village. He does a few different things, and Alexis and Daniel have a one-night stand because she gets stranded in this village, and they hit it off. But Alexis finds out that he is almost 10 years younger than her. I love this age gap in this story just because a lot of the time, if a younger man dates an older woman, she is considered a cougar. If a older man dates a younger woman, then the man is praised for it. Age is talked about once or twice in this story, and then it's just dropped. It is not the main factor of their relationship or why they cannot be together or why they can be together. Now, those are our main two characters in the first book. Yours Truly is about Bree, and Bree is Alexis's best friend. She works at the same hospital that she does. She ends up fake dating this new doctor in town. His name is Jacob. And the reason why Jacob moved to this specific hospital is because his ex starts dating his younger brother. Awful. Weird. I don't like that at all. I hate that, actually. I hate that so much. But I love the story. And then the third book, just for the summer, is about Emma. Emma is a traveling nurse who reads online on Reddit. It's the Am I the Asshole thread about how this one guy named Justin, every time he dates somebody, that person ends up finding her soulmate. And Emma's like, this happens to me all the time too. So they end up chatting a little bit, and they decide to fake date for the summer and then break up so their curses break as well, and they will find their soulmates. Those are our characters from the 3 stories, and I'm going to talk about the series as a whole because it is absolutely beautiful. I love that it is an interconnected standalone. I love that there's bits of pieces from each of these stories that come together. I think that Ali Jimenez does such a good job of bringing everything back together. I also really like how realistic these stories are. These are lighthearted stories and considered rom-coms, but the thing is that there is a lot of talk in these stories about mental health, about different diseases, about surgery and health-related issues, physical, mental, and emotional abuse. There are some really hard topics that are discussed in this story that are not so light, but Ali Jimenez does a really good job of speaking to these different issues that I think is very important, because that just makes these stories more real and relatable. Like, love stories are not all just happy-go-lucky and just with a happy ending. And yes, all of these stories do have a happy ending, but from start to finish, there is so much heartache and suffering that goes throughout the stories that leads to the happy ending. Something else I really appreciate about these stories that I've noticed that I wish we did more of is that Abby Jimenez not only provides us with our main female characters' point of views, but we also have our main male character point of views, and I absolutely loved reading from the male's POV. It just makes me connect to the character a lot more, and it makes me want to appreciate our main male character a lot more. So I really like that we had both point of views just so we can see the back and forth of how they're feeling and their emotions, and it was so good. I can just see myself reading these stories again. They were perfect. She wrote some really good books, and I highly recommend reading them. They will just make you feel all the feels. I can't say any bad things about these stories because I love them so much. The most recent book that I finished for the month of April was Funny Story by Emily Henry. What an anticipated release, and I can say that it lived up to the hype. I really enjoyed this story from the cover to the insides. Funny Story is about our main female character. Her name is Daphne. She is a children's librarian in a small town, Waning Bay, Michigan. And she ends up rooming and living with this guy named Miles, who works at a winery. And they are quite opposite of each other. They have nothing in common. The reason why that they end up living together is because their exes end up breaking up with them and dating each other, because her ex is childhood best friends with his ex. So they end up coupling up. So these two are left alone to live together, and I really liked their character dynamics. She is very type A, organized, put together, and then he is just very chaotic, a little bit dirty and disheveled and unorganized. So it's really interesting to see their character dynamics, especially when they're living in an apartment and living together. Miles's character was very much like Nick from New Girl. If you've ever watched that show, that is what I was picturing in my head, as was everyone else. It was just a really sweet story. I really appreciate that they do decide to fake date to try to make their exes jealous, but they become friends in the process. They are two people that they thought could never like or be together in general, but they end up fake dating and they become friends before lovers. And I really appreciated that, especially as a fake dating trope when it's usually like enemies to lovers or something where they don't like each other, but then they're forced to do something and end up falling in love. This was quite the opposite. They didn't know each other at all. They barely knew each other. And then they end up getting to know each other, being friends, taking care of each other. The only thing that they have in common is heartache. And because of their heartache, their friendship grows and they fall in love. I really liked the story. I liked how the story ended, especially with the title, Funny Story. If you do read it, it starts off with the funny story and it ends with a funny story. And it was just very sweet. I do believe that this is one of my favorite Emily Henry books. I really liked it. I think there's been a lot of mixed reviews for this one specifically, but I enjoyed it a lot. There's something about just connecting with characters that makes you appreciate a story so much more, and I sure did with this story. I will say that I do wish I could have gotten Miles's point of view because I liked him a lot as a character, but that's okay. I still really enjoyed this story. Caraval by Stephanie Garber is the first book in the Caraval trilogy. I really enjoyed this YA fantasy. This is a magical, mystical, suspenseful story about two girls. Our older sister is Scarlett and her younger sister is Donatella. She goes by Tella. This is in Scarlett's point of view, and they currently live with their abusive father. And Scarlett is very much afraid to do anything that's going to affect her and her father's relationship because her father is very abusive and she doesn't want her father to hurt her or her sister. So she's afraid to take chances. She's afraid to take risks and just enjoy her life. Scarlett is obsessed with the idea of Caraval, which is this game that happens once a year and it's very magical. Scarlett has this idea of true love and finding her soulmate, and she is said to be married to a count. currently. And then on the other hand, we have Donatella. Tella is the opposite. She is adventurous, mischievous. She just is looking for something new and something new to do. They both end up getting the opportunity from this one guy named Julian to run away and attend Caraval, and they're unsure of if they should do this. Scarlet is like, no, maybe not. But Donatella is like, absolutely, an adventure, sign me up. And this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. They do decide to go to the isle where Caraval is happening. And once they get there, Donatella is missing. She's gone. Scarlet cannot find her, and she believes that she's kidnapped. So now Scarlet has to go through these clues and be a part of Caraval and find her sister and win the game. There are so many plot twists in this story I was not expecting. I really enjoyed the writing style. It's so descriptive, especially with everything that's so magical and whimsical with Caraval. I really liked it. I also liked that, yes, this is a fantasy, but I felt like I was helping Scarlet figure out the different answers to the clues to help her find her sister, and I thought that was a lot of fun. I liked Scarlet as a character, but not as much as I did Donatella. Scarlet was just a protective older sister, and I do understand that. I'm the younger sister of the family. But the thing is that there is so much personal growth with Scarlet that makes you really appreciate her as a character by the end of the story. I also really liked the love interest that we have in this story as well, and the ending of it was unexpected, and it makes me want to read the second one even more. I plan on reading Legendary this month. I started it this morning. I'm about 50 pages in. Now, Legendary is the sequel, and it is Donatella's point of view, and I'm very excited to read from her point of view because she is the chaotic adventure girl. In this story, she is going to play the game again. She's going to be in Caraval, and the reason why she's doing this is because she needs to find out Legend's real name. That is what is going to happen in the story, and I also gotta say that I am very into her love interest, if this person that I'm thinking of is her love interest, and I'm excited to just read more. So this is the first book that I'm starting off in the month of May, and I very much liked Caraval a lot. Another book that I have a lot of love and hype for, and it is Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. This is a YA fantasy that I don't believe reads as a YA fantasy. It is so good and so deep and very descriptive in the best way. This is about our main character. Her name is Bree. She is dealing with the loss of her mom's passing. Her mom died in a car crash, and she is grieving in her own way through that. She ends up getting accepted to this accelerated high school program at the University of North Carolina. And the first night that she is there, she witnesses a demon with wings sucking the soul out of a human, like sucking the energy out of this human. And she's like, what the heck is going on? Where are we? This is the United States of America. How is magic real? So that happens on her very first night, and then from there on, she gets entangled into the secret society called the Legendborn, which is descendants of the Knights of the Round Table and King Arthur. What a wild concept. When I was reading this story, I was just shocked the entire time because Tracy Deonn wrote a really good story about King Arthur. I grew up watching King Arthur, the movie with Clive Owen and Keira Knightley, so many times. I loved it so much. Haven't thought about it since until reading this story, and now I'm very convinced that it was a really good movie and I have to rewatch it. Overall, the magic system in this story is so massive. It is very cool and very fascinating. I think that Tracy Deonn did such a great job with world building, and specifically to the world building, what I really like about it is that she adds so many like historical references and elements, especially with the Knights of the Round Table with that history, but also with US history. There's a lot of talk about oppression in this story that has to do with the magic system. There's a lot of talk about the South and the Civil War and how Black folk are treated and were treated even during the past times. It's just very fascinating how she intertwined all of that important information into the story and how that really relates to the magic system and then to Bree's life. Very fascinating, and I keep saying that. It's so well written. I really enjoyed the story. Also, the ending of the story was crazy, unexpected, like shocked. Did not expect it at all, and I loved it, and it made me want to go and pick up the next story right away. And with that, this month I will be reading Bloodmarked. I believe that this is going to be a trilogy, so the third one is coming out I think next year, but I couldn't wait, and I really just wanted to just read more about Bree and her past and where her roots are from and the culture, and learn more about this secret society that is just crazy, and crazy things happen. Yes, this is a sequel that I will be reading in the month of May. Bride was another anticipated release for me for the year, and I really enjoyed this story. This is Ali Hazelwood's first paranormal romance, and I think that she did a great job. I believe that there are a lot of mixed reviews for this story, but I ate it up. I really liked it. This is a story about Misery, who's a vampire, and Lo, who is a werewolf, and they end up getting married to build diplomatic relationships between their two clans, the species of vampires and werewolves coming together for protection and to build an alliance from the human world. Now, there's 3 different species in this story. There's the humans, the werewolves, and the vampires, and that's why they're kind of building ties, and so they can protect one another from the humans based on something that happens. This story is actually very political, a lot more political than I thought it would be, and I really liked it. I think that it was a little bit slower than her feminist rom-coms, but the slow burn really just made you want to keep reading even more. I really liked our main female character Misery and our main male character Lo as well. They're quite opposites, and she thinks that he hates her because she's a vampire, but like secretly like they really like each other, and the tension is just hot. It's really good, and I enjoyed it a lot. Don't be fooled by this paranormal romance, because our main female character Misery, she is still a STEMinist baddie, and she geeks out over computers and anatomy, and I do like that, especially in a paranormal romance. It kind of makes sense that she's really into anatomy because she's a vampire and things function differently than they would in human form. And then there's a lot of talk about how werewolves' anatomy works as well. If you know, you know. So yeah, I really appreciated that and the hints of that as well. I overall love a good fantasy and romantasy, and this paranormal romance was so fun to read. I think that Ali Hazelwood did a really good job with her first paranormal romance, and I hope that she creates a second one, because the ending of the story makes it seem like there's going to be a sequel, and I really hope so, because I need to know more about the politics, because there is a war a-brewing, I believe, after reading this first book. Really enjoyed it. In the month of April, I read In the Distance by Hernan Diaz, and this is a story about a Swedish immigrant who travels to New York with his brother from Sweden, and in the process, he gets separated from his brother. Hakan ends up landing in San Francisco rather than New York, and he has no one but himself in the process to travel and try to get to New York to find his brother. He doesn't speak English. He just gets involved in the most interesting and difficult situations and scenarios, and he meets so many shitty characters and people in the process. Hakan is such a lovable character. He is just a nice, caring person, and you really appreciate that, especially through all the hardships that he goes through. He goes through a lot of difficult things and scenarios, and you would think that that would harden a human being and make you really tough, and he is very tough, but the thing is he's just such a sweet soul, and it makes you really appreciate him as a character in the shitty world that he is a part of. Writing style is very captivating, and it describes the trials and tribulations of the 1800s in the West very, very well. It's very interesting. We were having this conversation during book club about how this is a Western story, but we're not traveling west. We're traveling away from the West. We're trying to go east. So it's very fascinating just how opposite that is, but it technically is still considered a Western. This was my very first Western, and I have to say that if I did not like our main character very much, I would not have finished the story. I really cared for our main character, Hakan, and it's so interesting because the writing style in this story is so bland and deserted, because most of the time in this story we are in the desert, and our author, he just goes pages and pages of describing the desert and the vast emptiness. But what's interesting is that there's so much you can say about the isolation. And the writing style, it goes on and on and on about how Hakan is just there in this empty space on Earth. And you really feel the isolation, and you really feel like you are with Hakan in this story. I really did enjoy this story. The Undertaking of Hart and Mercy is about our main male character. His name is Hart. He is a marshal in the world of Tanria, which is this magical world that Megan Bannen has created. And then Mercy is our main female character. She is an undertaker at Birdsall and Sons, which is her family's business that her father owned and created. Hart and Mercy do not like each other at all. They had like one or two interactions where they rubbed each other the wrong way, and since then they've been enemies, sworn enemies. One day Hart ends up writing a letter to a unknown person. He doesn't know who it's really going to. He just kind of sends it thinking that no one's gonna get it. It gets delivered, and who does it get delivered to? It gets delivered to Mercy. And from there, he's just talking about how lonely he is and he just wants a friend, and Mercy responds to Hart, but Mercy doesn't know it's Hart, and Hart doesn't know it's Mercy either. So they just message each other back and forth, and then do decide to meet one day. And when they do, things just start to unravel. And yes, this is a love story, but it's also a magical story. There are these weird monsters that keep showing up and sucking out souls of the undead. Or of the dead, and they're becoming undead. So there is that story as well. So you have this mystery of what is going on with the world of Tanria, while you have this love story that is kind of blossoming and blooming. And I really enjoyed this story by a local Kansas City author. I do recommend it. The second one is coming out in June, and I'm hoping to read it at some point. I did enjoy this story. I thought that the characters are really quirky and likable in their own ways, and Hart and Mercy are opposite of each other in terms of who they are as individuals, but they really do make a pair in the end, and it was a fun, goofy read, and I really liked it. A Sweet Sting of Salt was my Aardvark book club pick for the month of April, and this is a book that I wouldn't have picked if it was not for Aardvark, and I'm glad that I did. It was a little bit more slow for me. This is by Rose Sutherland, and this is about the Scottish folktale the Selkie wife. This story is about our main female character. Her name is Jean. She is a midwife, and this takes place in a town like Nova Scotia, and one night she ends up hearing these weird noises, and she goes outside. It's raining, pouring, there's a thunderstorm, not a place where you want to be hanging out outside, and she ends up finding a pregnant woman kind of screaming by the water. She rushes out and kind of takes the pregnant woman into her home. She doesn't know who this lady is. She'd never seen this woman before. She helps give birth to a little boy. So Murin, who is our mother now, Murin has a little boy, and this little boy has like webbed feet. So Jean is already like, this is weird. I've never seen this woman before. And also she gave birth to a little boy with webbed feet. What is happening? Who is this person? She finds out that Murin is married to Tobias, who is Jean's neighbor. Now, Murin doesn't really speak English, so at first they have this communication barrier, but what's so sweet is that they use their other senses to speak. They end up loving each other, and it's very sweet. Like I said, this is about the tale of the Selkie's wife, and Jean starts to realize that there's these weird things going on between Murin and Tobias, and not in a good way. And so Jean becomes very protective of Murin and starts to learn more about these secrets that Tobias and Murin are both having with each other. And it was a little slow for me to get into and read. It is very dark, moody, gloomy book, and I was reading it in Vegas. Quite the opposite settings here, but by the end of it, I really did enjoy this story as a whole. I think that knowing more about the Selkie wife would have made me appreciate the story a lot more, and it was such a unique story, and the tale is fascinating, and by the end of the story, you come full circle with the plot. I thought the middle was a little bit boring because it's very character driven, but by the end of it comes full circle. The plot was there, and I liked the connection between the Selkie wife and this tale because I couldn't figure it out until the end of it. But it was really good. I am glad that I read it. I do recommend it. It's a little slow, but this is a sapphic romance, very unique and different, which I think is why I recommend it. Okay, those were the books that I read and I really did enjoy. And now we're getting into those books that I read and I don't know what I read and I didn't like, or I DNF'd. There's only 3 though. The Vegetarian by Han Kang. What a disappointment. I got to say, I was really looking forward to reading the story, but I couldn't read it. I couldn't get into it. And it is so short. That's my thing. It's only 200 pages and halfway through, I was so confused. I'm not sure what I read. So this is about a girl who has a dream and decides that she's not eating meat ever again. And she kind of goes crazy because of it, and her relationships with her family is put to the test, and they treat her really poorly because she decides not to eat meat. And what is really interesting that I think I didn't like about the story is that it is from her husband's point of view, and then you get tiny dream tidbits from her, but majority of the story is from his point of view, and I hated that. I really just did not like that at all. I'm really disappointed that the story fell flat for me. I can't even tell you by the end of what happens because I finished it with an audiobook. And I was thinking I was just so glad to be done with it that I don't know what I read. Oh, at one point, the girl who is the vegetarian now, she ends up like banging her sister's husband. Things got really weird, and not in a good way. I am shocked still, but that's all I'll say about the story. I basically DNF'd it. I think I was really trying to finish the story because I own this book, and I was feeling guilty about it, but who cares? I should be reading things I want to read and things I like. I tried to read Poor Things by Alasdair Gray, and I maybe read 5 pages, and I decided that this book was not for me at all. I also don't think it's fair for me to read a story that I'm not fully immersed in and want to read. I think that if I do want to read something, I want to be all in just so I can really experience the storytelling, the writing style and whatnot. And this just didn't do it for me, and that's okay, because I did watch the movie and loved it. It was so weird. I am going to ship this book off to a book friend in Portland, Maine, who does want to read the book. And I really think that she is going to appreciate it, enjoy it a lot more than I ever would. So I'm going to be sharing this with her so she can have this copy for herself and hopefully enjoy it, because I did not. C'est la vie. Now, this last book that I tried to read and got I got 200 pages into and then decided to DNF it for the time being. I don't want any beef for this because I will be coming back to it. I just believe that right now at this time, I can't get into the book. And it's Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. Now, I know, I'm a little disappointed in myself too, but I'm still gonna give it another shot. Like I said, I got to 200 pages and I honestly have no idea what is happening in the story. I also think that's because I'm not fully invested in the story. This is very much dark academia, spooky vibes. My mood right now is sunshine, happiness, love, romance, magic, nothing really very dark. And I think that's why I just decided to DNF it. For the time being, I am going to try reading it again in the fall. I am sad to say that I tried reading the story. I got pretty far. I can't believe it. Yeah, it's 400 pages and I got halfway through. But it's not fair. I don't know what was really happening, and I think I just need to put more time into it when I am ready to read it later. Those are the books that I read in the month of April and my reviews for them. And then I also mentioned that I am planning on reading Bloodmarked, which is Legendborn sequel, and Legendary, which is Caraval's sequel. So I am reading those two books in the month of May, and then I have 3 more books that I am adding to my TBR for the month of May. One of the books being Leviathan Wakes by James S.A. Corey. Now, this is a chunky book. This is a space opera, and I have read books 1 through 6 before, but it has been a really long time, and I finally own all of the books of this series, the Expanse series, and I want to reread them just so I can get back to that world again. This story is about Earth, Mars, and the Belt, which is a set of space stations created in space, and it is about their politics and how they govern their society, which is now which takes place in the future. We follow different sets of characters in each book, but this first book is about James Holden, and he and his crew end up finding this weird alien artifact after a ship kind of explodes and people in the ship die, and he basically starts a war between Mars, Earth, and the Belters. It's kind of crazy what happens. It's been a while, so I'm getting excited to get back into it. The Great Reclamation by Rachel Heng. I am planning on reading this story as a buddy read with Seki. I will link her YouTube channel down below. She is a Kansas City booktuber, and she is the sweetest human. She's so sweet, and I always love her. Thanks! Bang buddies! This is a copy that we both received from Riverhead Books, and we decided that we would try to read it together, and I'm very excited to read this literary fiction. Now, I'm not really sure what this is about, so I'm just gonna read the blurb in the back. Born into the heat and beauty of 20th century coastal Singapore, An Boon is a gentle boy not much interested in fishing, but when he discovers he can locate impossibly beautiful movable islands that no one else can find, he feels a new sense of possibility, something to offer the community and impress Seok Mei, the spirited girl he has come to love. The Japanese army invades and resistance rises, and as the ocean hurtles toward rebirth, the two friends, newly empowered, must decide who they want to be and what they are willing to give up. So this seems like a historical fiction with a little bit of magical realism in it. I like that there's going to be Japanese history involved within this story. I think that's going to make it more meaningful and impactful. And I'm looking forward to reading this with Seki. For Aardvark Book Club, I did decide to get Ghost Station by S.A. Barnes. And it is a horror story by a horror author. She wrote Dead Silence. I have my laptop here so I can read the blurb to you. Psychologist Dr. Ophelia Bray has dedicated her life to study and prevent Eckert-Reiser syndrome, the most famous case of which resulted in the brutal murders of 29 people. It's personal to her, and when she's assigned to a small exploration crew who recently suffered the tragic death of a colleague, she wants to help. But as they begin to establish residency on an abandoned planet, it becomes clear that the crew is hiding something. Ooh, their pilot is discovered gruesomely murdered. Is this Ophelia's worst nightmare starting? A wave of violence and mental deterioration from ERS? Or is this something even more sinister? Wow, that just sounds very scary. And I can't wait to read it. Those are all of the books that I read in the month of April, and then the books that I'm planning on reading in the month of May. I decided to wrap it up into one video since we're already at May, and I have quite a few video ideas coming up for the rest of the month and for the rest of the summer. But if you do have anything you want to see, any type of vlogs, any books you want me to read and review, please let me know in the comments down below, and like this video if you did like it, and subscribe. I share a video once a week, usually Friday afternoons. Until next time, I will talk to you later. Bye.